Okay, it is now my privilege to bring to you Mr. Darrick Ballou and his paper, The Greatest Motivation. All right, go ahead, Darrick.
Is it possible that telling a falsehood could be moral under some circumstances? Machiavelli, an Italian philosopher, argued that lying would be good if it brought a positive outcome. In contrast, Immanuel Kant claimed that lying is wrong, regardless of the final result. Others might argue that if a person lies out of desire to help others, then lying is permissible. Those who agree with Kant might say that a person's motives do not excuse him from his actions. But no one can argue that motivations do not play a significant role in the worth of an action. Kant argued that the best motivation for an action was duty. Kant even claimed that actions only have moral worth if they are done out of duty, which according to Kant is doing an action because it is right, rather than doing it because of some benefit that might result from one's actions. Acting purely out of duty is praiseworthy, but it is not wrong for a person to find enjoyment in doing what is right. For an action to be moral, it must be motivated, not out of a desire for personal gain, but from a longing to selflessly serve God and people. Results do not determine whether or not an action is good. Some philosophers claim that the end justifies the means. Machiavelli wrote, "In the actions of all men, one looks to the end." Contrary to what Machiavelli claims, results cannot be used to judge whether or not an action is virtuous. A greedy tyrant long ago could have killed an innocent young man. If the man was the great-grandfather of Adolf Hitler, would the action suddenly be justified? Out of one seemingly malicious deed, the tyrant could have possibly saved the millions of innocent Jews who died in the Holocaust. Perhaps even the gruesomeness of the Second World War would have been entirely averted. The tyrant's action would still be considered evil, even though he unknowingly might have saved the lives of millions. Actions are committed with a longing for a given result. When a husband and wife desire to have their children grow up to be good Christians, they commit to raising their children well. Raising children well will most likely result in their children becoming godly men and women. However, in some cases, children might grow up to become drug addicts rather than followers of Christ. Good parenting cannot always be judged by the results. Parents can create an environment most suitable for their children's growth into godly men and women, but they cannot force their children to love God. For this reason, receiving a reward for good conduct does not make that conduct better or worse. A tyrant might receive wonderful rewards for killing an innocent man. Immanuel Kant directly objected to Machiavelli's dangerous moral claim, writing, "The good will is not good because of what it affects or accomplishes, or because of its competence to achieve some intended end." Kant recognized that results do not always reflect the morality of an action. Quality of the work sometimes corresponds to its end, but one cannot judge an action by what it accomplishes. The morality of an action cannot be assessed simply by the nature of the action itself. Immanuel Kant wrote, "Nothing in the world, indeed nothing even beyond the world, can possibly be conceived which would be called good without qualification, except a good will." Kant points out that even happiness, which is often considered a virtue, can be evil under some circumstances. If a man rejoices in another man's misfortune, he acts in a morally deficient way. Many different actions can be good or evil based on the circumstances and motivations. People universally recognize lying as a wicked action. However, Rahab lied in order to save the lives of Hebrew spies who were exploring the city of Jericho, and her action was considered righteous. Lying is typically considered evil, but lying is not inherently evil. Based on a person's intent, lying can be either good or bad. One cannot judge with certainty whether an action is good or bad based on the nature of an action. If people were told that a man went to church, many of them would assume the given action to be good, even without knowing the intent. However, the man could have been going to church to spy on the congregation. The spy could have plans to collect the names of the pastors so that they could be sent to prison. Without knowing the man's motivations for going to church, there would be no way to know whether the action was good or bad. Without first knowing the motivation behind the action, one cannot determine whether or not a given action is moral. Without knowing a person's motives, it is hard to truly judge the merit of a given action. Results, rewards, punishment, and persecution have little correlation to a person's moral standing. To know with certainty whether an action is good, one must know the heart behind it. Even the acts of God might sound evil if one does not know the intent. God sent his own Son from paradise to earth. He let his own Son die on a cross when he could have spared him. Such actions sound evil until it is understood that God's intent to save people from their sins through his Son's death. It is hard to know whether someone is trying to do good or evil in many cases. Humans do not have the ability to perceive each other's thoughts. In Scripture it is written, man looks at the outer appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. People judge the morality of actions based on their observable portion of the action, but they cannot perceive the intentions of the heart. However, God judges the works of man best because he can perceive the intent behind the work. Judging whether an action is good or bad without first knowing the motivation behind the action is like judging a book by its cover. With books and actions, it is possible to see the outside very easily without seeing the content inside. Often a book's quality is not the same as its own cover. In the same way, the observable action appears quite different once the motivation for the action is known. The motives behind any deed reveal the action's true moral value. Immanuel Kant tried to show means by which people could prove moral laws through reason. He believed that the way people typically distinguish between what is good and what is evil was too empirical. The logical formula Kant discovered, from which morality could be derived, is often referred to as the categorical imperative. Kant described the categorical imperative when he wrote, I ought never to act in a way that I could not also will that my maxim should be a universal law. To find out whether a certain action is moral, one needs only to ask a question. Could this action be obeyed by rational beings without any serious consequences? That one question is the key aspect of the categorical imperative. Kant followed in his book, Foundations of Metaphysics of Morals, by giving an example of how the categorical imperative can be used to prove that lying is wrong. Kant wrote, would I be content that the maxim of extricating myself from difficulty by false promise should hold as a universal law for myself as well as others? Kant decided that such a law would not be able to hold. If everyone lied whenever they needed to get out of difficult circumstances, Kant concluded that promises would no longer exist. Therefore, Kant argued, based on the categorical imperative, that lying is wrong. Kant supposed that all other aspects of morality could be derived through the categorical imperative. Categorical imperative successfully proved that lying is wrong. However, the categorical imperative is a flawed litmus test for morality. At first glance, the categorical imperative appears to correctly diagnose good and evil actions. Kant's categorical imperative can be used to prove that murder, theft, and many other foul actions are wrong. One question, however, that should be asked is if celibacy is permissible under Kantian ethics. Some philosophers over the years, including St. Augustine, have condemned sexual relationships even within marriage. When the categorical imperative is applied to this law, it appears that choosing to be a bachelor might truly be an awful sin. Could a person accept the maxim of abstaining from marriage and sexual relations for one's entire lifetime become a universal law? No, certainly not. For if everyone was celibate, there would be no more marriages or births. Without marriages or births, the human race would essentially go extinct. Therefore, choosing to be celibate is an extremely evil sin, according to Kant's categorical imperative. Never getting married may not be a desirable life choice for most people, but it is certainly not immoral. In fact, the Apostle Paul recommended that people choose to be celibate if they did not have a strong urge to be married. Conversely, the categorical imperative dictates that remaining unmarried for one's whole life is extremely wicked. Obviously, remaining a bachelor or a maid for life is not a sin. Most people end up getting married at some point in their lives. But for some people like Paul the Apostle, it is a better choice to stay single. One critical issue with the categorical imperative is its demand for there to be a universal law. Some actions that would have awful consequences when applied on a global scale are actually very good for the individual. Therefore, one should question the credibility of the categorical imperative to prove the moral worth of an action. The issue with the categorical imperative is that it really does not prove anything. Nobody needs the categorical imperative to prove that it is evil to lie, murder, or steal. People already know that those actions are evil because they use reason apart from the categorical imperative or from the conviction of their conscience. If the categorical imperative fails to correctly define moral laws in certain circumstances, then it cannot be relied upon to judge what is moral. Kant did not simply declare the categorical imperative and the goodwill to be the foundation for morality. First, he demonstrated that by using the categorical imperative, a person could prove that lying is wrong. Why would testing the categorical imperative be necessary if it was the way to discover morality? Man already inherently knows that dishonesty is a vice, while truthfulness is a virtue. That is why Kant had to test the categorical imperative. If it demonstrated that lying is permissible whenever it is convenient, nobody would believe the categorical imperative. Humanity instinctively already knows that lying is wrong without the categorical imperative. David Hume, a British philosopher, suggested that morality is not based on reason at all. Hume wrote, "When you pronounce an action or character to be vicious, you mean nothing but that from the constitution of your nature, you have a feeling of or sentiment of blame from the contemplation of it." According to him, sensation was the entire basis for morality. People do not use reason to discover the taste of pineapple. And Hume claimed that it is also inappropriate to use reason to discover morality. Hume claimed that people discover morality through feelings they get when contemplating an action. People seem inherently to know how to act virtuously and how to act despicably. How can humanity have an inherent common understanding of morality and ethics? There appears to be a moral code that is above human reason, and yet at the same time seems to be perceived in part by both the heart and the mind. Man seems to have a knowledge of morality that is beyond his own reasoning or sensation. Thomas Aquinas claimed that God placed his eternal law on human hearts. Aquinas called God's law placed on the hearts of people the natural law. Aquinas wrote, "It is therefore evident that the natural law is nothing else than the rational creature's participation of the eternal law." God has implanted his eternal law on our hearts as the natural law. People's consciences express the natural law, which God has placed on our hearts. Humanity already has an inherent understanding that certain actions are good while other actions are evil. The reason humans have inherent knowledge when it comes to certain aspects of morality is because God has implanted a sense of morality, which is often called a conscience, on the human heart. God's nature is the ultimate basis for morality, but God put his law on the hearts of humans so that they seem to have an inherent ability to understand what is moral. Reason usually shows that an action is wrong after a person already knows from his conscience that the act is wrong. People think about murder before they use the cow or compare it, and they already know it is a vile act. People already know that it is wrong to murder, lie, and steal, so they try to find out why. Reason helps people discover why it is wrong to murder. Through reason, one contemplates that murder is wrong because human life is precious to God. All these acts are wrong because they are against God's nature. Both reason and impressions are simply tools that help man understand God's moral law. Therefore, moral actions are those actions whose motivations are in line with God's nature. Motivations and intentions have as much to do with the morality of an action as the observable action itself. Kant recognized that intentions were important. He proposed that duty is the only possible good motivation for an action. Kant wrote, "To have genuine moral worth, an action must be done from duty." Kant explained that no action can be dutiful if it is done out of self-interest. According to Kant, a merchant who avoids cheating his customers so that business will be more successful does not do his action out of duty. He runs his own business only in order to keep his customers. Kant is correct in saying that people should not do good things simply for the benefits. But he goes farther to say that people should not even do good things out of affection. Kant admits that very few actions are done simply out of duty, but he views those acts as the noblest. It is a duty to preserve one's life, Kant explains. As he gives an example, one man loves his life, while another wishes to commit suicide. If the man who wants to commit suicide preserves his life out of duty, Kant claims that his action has far more merit than a man who loves his life. Kant's philosophy seems to believe that anything that does not have to be worked for does not have a high moral value. If being kind comes easily to a person, then for her to be kind has no true moral value because her actions are not being done out of duty. Kant is categorically against people finding any enjoyment in doing good. Actions should be motivated by love for God and not simply out of duty. Humans were created to do actions out of an affection. Kant ignores the fact that if a person acted only out of duty, much of their humanity would be stripped from them. According to Kant, even being kind, simply because you love being kind to people, has no moral value. Kant wrote, many persons so sympathetically constituted that without any motive or vanity or selfishness, they find an inner satisfaction in spreading joy and rejoice in the contentment of others, which they make possible. But I say that however dutiful and amiable that may be, that kind of action has no true moral worth. From Kant's perspective, there should be absolutely no motivation to do good. Showing kindness to people out of compassion, as Jesus often did, is inferior to doing an action simply from Kantian duty. In every choice a human makes, he denies certain affections for others. Kant's claim that duty is the only legitimate motivation for an action goes directly against the way Christians are to live. When a couple gets married, they forsake certain affections they might have had before for the sake of each other. Christians forsake certain affections they have because they discover that the one they truly love the most is their Savior, Jesus Christ. Kant demanded that people embark on a new moral quest, to do truly everything in the best possible way. One must forsake every affection and simply do the right thing out of duty. Kant's proposal is an absurdity, for certain good works require human affection. How can a Christian love God or love his neighbor out of duty? Kant responded by answering, love is an inclination and cannot be commanded. He tried to get around the issue by claiming the word only meant beneficence, which he claimed could be carried out through duty. Scripture, however, is clear that Christians do not love God simply out of duty. In 1 John, it is written, we love because he first loved us. Christians love God not simply because it is their duty, but they love him because when they are struck by the greatness of his love for them, they cannot help but love him back. The actions of the highest moral value are not done out of duty, but out of love for God. When one loves the Lord with all of his heart, soul, mind, and strength, he cannot help but love doing what is good. The greatest motivations are consistent with a love for God and a love for the people that he created. Those who love God can be naturally motivated to serve the poor, preach the gospel, and encourage the brokenhearted. When people have the correct motivations, good works and actions follow. Loving God is the best motivation because it consistently inspires people to do good works. The most important action is not one that is done out of duty, but one that is done out of love for God. When Christ came and died, he set man free from obeying the law simply out of duty. Under the old covenant, people were told to follow laws simply out of duty. Now, because of the price Jesus paid, Christians are saved by grace and not through the worth of their own works. Christians do good works in response to God's love for them, rather than trying to pay the debt they owe because of sin. Christ paid every debt people owed because of sin by dying on the cross. Christians can be motivated to do many good acts by the love they have for their Savior, who paid the price for their sins. The purest human actions are the ones which are motivated by love for God.
Yeah! Ballou. Really appreciate your presentation. And I would like you to go back to the comparisons that you were making between Hume and Kant as to what is the means that we really do derive morality from, and how we know what is moral and what is not. With Kant, he has a sort of logical equation that one works through in order to know what is moral. As a categorical imperative, as a way of understanding what is moral, simply through a kind of logical derivation. And Hume had understanding that morality is known more through experience. And so with Kant, it seemed like you derived morality like you would some sort of geometric proposition. You just use the right reasoning and you can know what's moral. With Hume, it's a little bit more like, knowing whether or not chocolate and pineapples taste the same. If somebody said, well, chocolate and pineapples don't taste the same, and somebody was to come back and say, well, yeah, prove it to me, though. It would be kind of a silly notion. You just have to, you taste them, you experience them, the two are different. Well, in the realm of morality, would you say that morality is actually understood by us in a way that is more like a logical derivation, or is it something that is more experiential and immediate in that fashion?
I would say that morality is not. I would say that morality. I want to make a clear distinction. I do think that you can find morality through reason, but I want to also just clarify that I don't think that that there is a cure-all fix for discovering all of morality through some kind of formula or something like that. I don't think that, I think maybe it is possible that some formula could be deduced, but I don't think that humans have come up with one yet, and so I somewhat doubt that they will in the future as well. I think the categorical imperative in itself just has a fundamental flaw in that it's designed to apply an action to all humans when in reality, which completely takes away from the specifics of the motivation and the circumstances of the action. And I think I would also say that, in the end, I think that that morality is deduced in a certain sense from the heart, as I explained in the paper, that God has implanted his laws on the human heart. And I think that allows humans to, in two cases, both be able to use their minds and comprehend how a certain action is wrong, or even just you look at a certain action and you just already know, like you know instantly that that's wrong. So I think that there's two sides of it. I mean, like even with the pineapple, I'm sure there are some scientists who have gone and explained the science behind why a pineapple tastes the way it does. And I think that's kind of what reason ends up doing with morality, is it explains to us, okay, this pineapple has this much sugar and this much acid, and it has whatever this that makes it smell a certain way that a pineapple does. But then gut instincts are kind of like when you taste that pineapple. So I would say I don't agree completely with Hume, because I feel like Hume almost views our perception of morality as the actual morality. But I think that in the end, morality is obviously based on God's nature.
All right, and if it's based on God's nature, does that mean that we determine morality by trying to derive some sort of logical connection to an attribute that we know of God's nature? Is that how you would say, if morality is based in God's nature, then does that mean that it should be derived in a logical deduction from our knowledge of his nature?
Well, what I would say is that, God put his nature on us. We're created in God's image. And so that would be kind of my thought process there. But I think there's also a place for logical deduction, obviously, especially when you have Scripture. You know what I'm saying? Like, because when you have scripture, you can take that scripture and you can logically deduce certain things that are right and wrong, because that gives you a little bit of knowledge as to what God's actual nature is. I think without scripture, it's very, very hard to logically deduce anything based on God's nature, because it's somewhat hard for you to know what God's nature is.
All right, thank you very much. And I'd also like you to explain just one quote that you had from Immanuel Kant, your second sentence in your paragraph introducing Immanuel Kant. You said, Immanuel Kant tried to show a means by which people could prove all of the moral laws through reason. He believed that the way people typically distinguish between what is good and what is evil was too empirical. Could you explain Kant's argument as to why he believed that empirical observation was not appropriate in trying to distinguish right and wrong?
Well, I think that Kant's reasoning for thinking that, other methods are too empirical is that, the issue is that you have one person who looks at a certain action and maybe thinks that it's good, while another person thinks that it's evil. And that's a key. And you look at a certain action, and is it good, is it evil? And based on people's different personalities, I guess he's proposing that they'll come up with different answers for what is moral, which is definitely legitimate. I think that if you're going to go completely down the road that Hume is right, then yes, it is too empirical, or it can't be deduced through reason.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ballou. We'll open it up to others who might like to ask questions at this time. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Ballou?
I'm thinking of one.
Ben, are you talking?
No, I was just thinking of a question, but now I have a question. So, in Kant's argument, where he has certain moral statutes that everyone can, the categorical imperative is just that there are certain moral statutes that you form from saying, if I do this, is it something that I would be fine with everyone else doing? Correct?
Yeah, I mean, would I be fine with everybody else doing it, but also even, the issue is, would I be fine with everybody else doing it, is that kind of defeats the whole purpose of empirical, because different people could be fine with different things. So I think that it's almost like a double sense of, is it possible for this action to be applied among all people? And then obviously, would you go for such an action? In the end, it's like, what are the consequences of that action? Because that's typically how he determines it. Like, for example, with lying, the reason he says it's wrong is because if everybody lied whenever they wanted to, then there would be no more promises. And so I think the idea is, what are the consequences of it, and are you willing to accept those consequences in a certain circumstance?
Yeah. So, do you think that, because obviously our judgment is faulty, which is why it's not empirical, because that it can't apply to every, can you still, I'm going to wait till you're done loading. Okay, you're right. Alright, so our judgment is faulty, and there are lots of different circumstances that we have on earth which make it so that it's hard for there to be certain things that are just, certain things that are just there forever. Like, or that apply to every circumstance. But if God used the categorical imperative, if God used the categorical imperative, where he was able to see everyone's intention, and because the problem with any human-formed moral system is that we can't see the intentions. But if God was to use the categorical imperative and he can see our intentions, would it have a better outcome?
Okay, so So the thing with this question is that you're asking if God used the categorical imperative. But the issue is, you're talking about him seeing the intention and everything. But the issue with the categorical imperative is fundamentally that it's generalized to everyone. So it's like, if everybody did this action, would the result be good? You know what I'm saying?
But
And so you hopefully take out the intention from it when you when you say it. Because for example, even with when Kant proves that like lying is wrong, like in a previous example I said, well, lying actually isn't wrong in all circumstances. You look at Rahab, she was rewarded by God for lying and got literally grafted into the line of Jesus.
Yeah. But if you look at thoughts and intentions as actions, because the categorical imperative is often applied just to physical outward actions, but if you also think of thoughts and intentions as actions, does that make the categorical imperative function better just because of the fact that you could say, alright, well, I did this one specific action, but if everyone had the same intent behind me, I would be fine with the circumstances.
I would say, yeah, possibly. It could possibly. I just don't think it would be the ideal thing, because in the end, this is the thing. I think there could be some possibility that the categorical and comparative could be correct if one had perfect reason and perfect all of that. But I think that the categorical imperative is already, to a certain extent, just the principle is already flawed to begin with. So it would be like God trying to use flawed human reasoning to prove a certain moral law.
So,
because it would be like God has some kind of way better proof than the categorical imperative, or even doesn't really need a proof because he's God and it's his literal nature. So it's like knowing himself. But
so the categorical imperative currently gets it right like 90% of the time, or no, probably more like 60% of the time. And then if you worked on it really good, so you got it to all the intentions and knew everyone's emotions and stuff, then you could get it to be correct 90% of the time. But it's still never going to be as correct as where the morality actually comes from, because the system itself is.
I would say that. I would say it's almost like trying to discover all of morality using all of mathematics, using just like addition and subtraction and never getting into any algebra or anything like that. You get to prove at a basic standpoint that certain things are wrong and certain things are acceptable. But everything else basically gets left alone. So it's basically like trying to attack all of math and, with just addition and subtraction, which isn't going to get you that far.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, it'll get you pretty far, but it's not going to. You're not going to get into any algebra stuff or any, more complex stuff. So at a certain point, it just doesn't have the bandwidth to reach around the different actions.
All right, I think Paul has a question. Let's go to Mr. Paul. Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Darrick. So my question is more of a nature versus nurture, right? So what I was thinking is, let's say we have a psychopath, right? He's living in a secular society, and I say secular because I want to emphasize that there's no set in stone values that he can refer to, such as, I guess you can argue that the United States was founded on Christian values, Judeo-Christian. So I'm saying a secular society, secular founded. Now, let's say there's no morals he can refer to construct his moral compass, and he's a psychopath who enjoys to murder, not with any malicious intent, he just enjoys the murder. Now, I'd say that a normal person in today's world would feel guilty after murdering somebody, but this guy, he doesn't do it with any malicious intent. He just likes killing people. He just likes it, right? How would you explain natural law? people like this exist?
Existed, I would probably, if that existed, I would probably question a little bit what I think, but I don't think that that does exist, because that your point is exactly an example that would be contrary to the whole concept of believing that, you know, there is a natural law that God has implanted in our hearts, and that He did give us reason and sensation to be able to, you know, understand what He's done. So your example goes directly contrary to that, because it would be that somebody in that case is, but okay, I would say that it's not completely contrary. And the reason why is because in the end, people can really corrupt their minds, and people can really corrupt their minds to a point where they get themselves to believe that what they're doing is just fine. To say that the person would never ever know or have a streak of guilt, yeah, that's a little bit of a stretch, but there are many cases where people sin and they cover up that sin and they pretend that it isn't there, and they pretend that that it's not bad at all, you know, and they have no guilt or shame or anything. So I would say at that point, I wouldn't say so much that it even goes against it. I think that just shows a case of somebody whose capabilities for reason and their capabilities for a lot of their humanness has almost been stripped away from them at that point. And I would say that they're almost just not human if they're just going and killing people and not really getting some streak of guilt that what I'm doing is wrong.
Sorry, I was just gonna ask some more. Well, what I was sort of thinking about was, because people like this do exist, right? The psychos, the kids who grew up to love, I don't know, strangling puppies or something. But what I'm thinking is, are they just devoid? Is it a physical issue where they don't possess the capabilities for a natural law?
I honestly, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think that it would have to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis, but I definitely think that in such a case, when, you know, you have something like that, I don't think it's necessarily they don't have the comprehension. Like, for example, I had a friend at one point, he did a lot of bad stuff. I mean, he just tell it straight up to me and my mom. Didn't feel a streak of guilt, no problem. And he's actually, like, from a certain standpoint, you can still tell that guy that in a lot of cases, he's actually a very sweet and nice boy, but just that sometimes he just makes really awful decisions. And he doesn't realize how bad they are, because he just really admits to them and doesn't feel a streak of guilt. So I would just say that in some cases you can get people whose minds have been really corrupted. Either it could be something where it's like they're like that and then they have to be raised out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like when you have somebody who doesn't have a firm sense of what morality is, that's a lot of what goes into parenting, is you implanting the knowledge that you have about morals onto your children, the areas that they don't know. Because otherwise, it's kind of like, yeah, sure, you have this natural law. This is the thing. At the same time that, you know, God and family and Christian friends around you are trying to raise you and help you to better understand what is good and evil, at that same time, the devil's honestly trying to take that away. He's trying to take away the image of God that you have, because he hates God. And so he wants that to go away. And so secular society and, and the devil is going to try to take a lot of what you know to be good and evil, and they're going to try to twist it. It's always his plan. I mean, from the beginning in the Garden of Eden, you look at it like it's exactly what the devil's trying to do. The one thing they can't do, eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then you get the devil going, well, is that really what the rules are? Did God really say that? And so it's constantly basically his scheme to try to take that away.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Ballou? Mr. Ballou, I'd like to go back to the concept that Hume had of morality being something that is more experientially derived. In the use of reason, the capacity to use reason is something that really develops well under practice. It's always very interesting to watch students learning geometry and kind of stumble about with things in the early weeks, and then gradually the geometric concepts firm up in their mind, and they're able to kind of very quickly move from one geometric concept to another. The people also talk about things that are experiential taking practice, like somebody who's a wine taster. A wine taster has to practice their art, and they can get to a point where they can distinguish, thousands of different types of wine. But it's through a sort of experiential practice, not a sort of using, developing the syllogisms of reason and logic. Would you say there's something equivalent to that if morality is based in more of an experiential fashion, that there is a sort of experiential practice that we can go through that allows us to have a more accurate experience of what would be moral and what would not be?
Well, I mean, how many of us have heard this, the statement, you can learn this the easy way or you can learn this the hard way. I mean, you can learn it the first time by, just maybe knowing it deep down in your heart, or by hearing your parent tell it to you, or by, reading it in a book, and that's the easy way, to figure out morality, because you don't get, the bitter consequences of, doing the wrong thing. But there's also a way to learn things the hard way, and that is by doing certain actions. I'm sure that somebody, a good example you could even give is just like somebody commits murder or some other vile action, and they get struck by how awful it is. And so I would just say that, yes, experience can help, but I think in both the sense of learning it from other people who are very wise, who have gone through experiences before by reading the Bible, just directly getting to understand what's good and what's bad. But then beyond that, if you go and you do different actions, yes, you will be able to, there is a way that by doing some evil, vile action that you could be very, very conscience stricken and realize that action is good. I don't think that's the ideal way to learn morality, obviously, because that demands that you have to not know what is good and evil and then just go through life making mistakes. But I mean, in some cases, that is what people do.
Would you say that there's a way of learning experientially the nature of things as to whether or not they're moral or not without us doing them ourselves? Is there something that would be more equivalent to sort of observational learning?
Well, that's what's Hume's thought process. That's why when he says, I wish I had that quote right with me, but he doesn't say that you get the feeling of sentiment or blame for an action because you go do it. He says, just from contemplating it, you get that sense of that is a very, very vile and wicked action. And so I would say that I would say that like it's not 100%, and that's why people need to use reason also to discover morality, along with just the feelings or whatever that they get. But I would say that in that case, yeah, there is a way that you can think about murder or think about different moral actions, and you think about it in your head, and you just go, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like there is that concept that we have a conscience, and even by thinking of some action that's vile, we can just get that sense of, oh, that's very, very evil.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ballou. Other questions? All right, I think it's fair enough that after starting at 8 o'clock this morning, some of us are a little bit tired. So I think we'll let things rest there. Thank you very much, Darrick. Very well done. Good job. All right, and I hope you all will be back bright and early tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to continue with Mr. Benjamin Hendricks tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye, folks. Have a good sleep and have a good day, Darrick.
See you in Dubai.
See you. Hey Ben.
Yeah.
I'll see your paper. I'll see you.